Welcome back to another episode of With a Grain of Salt. I am your host, Isaiah Salter, and I appreciate you tuning in yet for another week. I am so grateful and blessed to be in the presence of Tracy Dando.
Aww.
Tracy, how are you doing today?
I am so good. Thank you for having me here with you today.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm grateful. This has been a long time coming.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've connected a lot off screen, so I really do appreciate you taking the time, and I think this is the beginning of something special.
Oh,
truly.
Hands down. There's a knowing. Hands down.
Yeah. Let's just start with how are you doing? You know, what's been going on in your life? You know, how are you kind of navigating this season and this time, and things of that nature?
Good question.
Yeah.
This season is a time of change for me, transition. And we talked about this before. Transition is hard because you're trusting in the unknown. And I think that we, as humans, create these narratives or these expectations around what we're supposed to be doing or what it's supposed to look like or what our story is. And when it doesn't go that way, it's really hard to embrace the change that and the unknown. And I'm in that place right now, and I'm just trying to give into it.
Absolutely. I feel you. Embracing the unknown. Because it's scary to not know. It's like we want a sense of control over everything in our lives. And when we don't have that, it's kind of, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But every time in my life where I have gone after the unknown or pushed through that sort of barrier, the other side has been something I couldn't really ever even dream up.
That's a beautiful
insight. So it's actually this, there's this little feel of anxiety, but there's also this what if? What's there? It's kind of excitement.
Yes, I love that. Can you bring us back to some of your earliest memories that kind of shaped you into the person that you are today and kind of led you to the journey that you're on?
Oh, wow.
Now, yeah.
Earliest memories.
Yeah, bring us back.
I think some of my earliest memories were me singing Whitney Houston on the fireplace at my parents' house as a child. I loved to be on a stage. And even though I do love to sing, I do not have a voice fully for stage. But I do love to I don't know if it's the energy moving through me or I think it's that. And I found that I could do that through music, but I could also do that through words. But I had this huge fear that hit me probably middle school of being too big and taking up too much space. And I stopped that at a young age, stopped being on stages, stopped speaking out.
Wow.
And it's something that I have just started recently doing again.
Wow. What made you stop? Do you remember what happened or what was going on in your life that kind of made you want to shut that part of you off?
Yeah. I think being a teenage girl. I think there was this need to fit in. And I always knew that I saw the world differently. I always knew that what I was feeling was different from others, but I was so terrified to speak out of the crowd, to be different, to say what I needed to say. And so I learned pretty early on how to shut that part off and sort of just fit in.
Wow.
And I don't think I grew the confidence until the last few years to really start to use my voice authentically and say what I had to say, what I have to say.
Did that want to fit in lead to kind of what you experienced when you were younger with how you even started this place and dealing with some of your mental health and just issues that you went through?
Absolutely. I think so much of eating disorders, they stem from trauma. They stem for many reasons in different people. But for me, the need to look like everybody else was this constant focus that took so much energy that it took it away from everything else. And one of the first things to go was my creativity, was my light, because all of that energy was going towards making my body stay how the world told me that way my body was supposed to look.
Oh my Lord. That must have been incredibly difficult to even try to navigate and go through at that age. What was it like Did you have a lot of support during that time?
I did. I mean, my family like supported me the best that we knew how. Like I was diagnosed at 14, but it absolutely started much earlier than that. By 14, I was really at my breaking point where I was having suicidal ideations, and the depression was really bad, and the eating disorder was in full control. And so we did what we were told to do. We saw a therapist. We got me on some meds to help support. But really, that's all anybody knew about eating disorder. Like we weren't talking about eating disorders at that time. It was still very hush hush. So I had no idea why I was doing what I was doing. I just knew I couldn't stop. I knew I couldn't stop. It was like the fear of death was in me. And that's the power that food held. Like it was really that powerful.
I can't even imagine what that's like at 14.
Yeah.
Like you're still maturing, growing, trying to figure out who you are and having to deal with that on the side. Oh, do you remember like what helped you get out of some of those low moments in your life? Like when you were dealing with that depression, when you were getting put on medication and being told that you have this disorder and stuff like that. Like how long did that period last of, I don't even know if there was any like refusal to believe it or accept it, or if you did, like how long did that period last for you to really overcome that season of your life?
Yeah, good question. So I would say the things that brought me, there's very little joy when you are in that point of an eating disorder. Joy is one of the things you lose first. And I would say music brought me joy. Music has always been such a powerful tool for me. But you start to isolate yourself, so people do not bring you joy. People actually bring you more stress because it's more energy to pretend that you're okay. So you're constantly you're putting on a mask around people, and it's exhausting. So you tend to isolate a lot, and so there's very little escape from that world. Even sleep doesn't bring that. So I'd say if there were anything, it would be the animals that I had at that time, the dogs, or music. I would say those were the two things that like I held on to. And then what was your second question? You had two.
Like just how long did that period last, and what was like that process of getting through it?
Yeah.
Coming out the other side.
So I would say I didn't find a state of recovery until my early 30s. So I was in the full-blown eating disorder from probably 10 to about 31. And I was in 6 different treatment facilities during that time. Residential treatment, which is where you live in a home and your meals are monitored. You can't go to the bathroom by yourself. You go to support groups, you go to therapy, you go to nutrition. And basically it's because you get yourself to such a state of depletion that your brain is not working, like to be completely honest. And you can't start doing the work of why the eating disorder started until you get your brain functioning again and you get medically stable. And so there's a stability that has to come. And then, so I would get to that place of stability. I'd start to get to this place of hope again. I'd start to feel some of these like, okay, maybe I can do this. And then I'd come back to Syracuse. And what we weren't talking about then was that the body remembers. The body remembers everything. And we weren't talking about trauma in the body. It was we were only healing the brain at that point through SSRIs and through talk therapy. There was no other body talk. And I remember the first time I was handed a book, The Body Keeps the Score, and it was like these things were going off in my, like these moments in my brain of like, wow, like I feel understood. And so when I would come back to Syracuse, the eating disorder would just come right back. And it was because so much had happened to me in this town that my body was like, my nervous system was instantly like triggered back. And it goes right to that coping mechanism that works. And eating disorders, they work, which is why they're so hard. They work for a period of time.
Yeah.
And that's why they're so hard to recover from.
Before we even get past this point, I want to take a pause and ask you, what would be some advice to a young person dealing with what you went through now?
Love that you asked that. First of all, first and foremost, recovery is 100% possible. 100%. I don't think we are told that enough in the recovery world. It is 100% possible. There are many steps to the process, and there are many times we fall down and we have to get back up. And but I want people to know, first of all, they are not alone. Mm-hmm. So much of eating disorders live in shame and isolation, and that is how they hold on to us. We don't tell anybody about them because we're so ashamed. And so the first step of recovery, the first step of taking your power back is saying, I'm not okay, and asking for help. And so it's finding that person that you trust to guide you on the next step. But that first step is huge, because the eating disorder will control your world until you bring it outward and say, I need help, until you speak to that shame. So I just want people to know they are not alone. There is support in our community. I am personally here to support, and that it is 100% possible to recover from from an eating disorder.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. Well, that's amazing advice, because I think so often, that hope of just things can work out.
Yeah.
It can work out in your favor, and it can be okay. It can help a lot of people, because a lot of people really get to certain places where they feel like this is it.
Yeah, I personally, I think both of us, right? I got there many times.
Yeah, absolutely. And absolutely.
There's this level of darkness that you get to that I am now grateful for, which may sound ridiculous, but I now think I can experience a level of lightness, of light, because of that darkness that I experienced. It's really powerful. So I truly believe that we all have these gifts, and the eating disorder has this way of using the gift against us. And as you start to unravel why the eating disorder is there, your true self starts to emerge and become more and more powerful. And eventually the eating disorder self is not needed anymore, and it falls away. And there you are. Wow. And it's actually this really powerful experience, but it's really shameful for people that are going through it. So.
Yeah, I've never heard it broken down like that. I love that. I love the, in order to really embrace and experience the light, you had to go through the dark. I love that, because I think it's the law of duality, understanding that, we're going to go through hard times, adversity, struggle, really low moments, but in a way they're doing something that's going to help you to appreciate and experience the other side of an experience like that, if that makes sense in life. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Even now, when I have those moments, they're not as dark. Mm-hmm. First of all, I trust I have the tools in the community around me to support me. But second of all, I get excited about what's on the other side.
I love it. I love that perspective.
Because I know something, yes. So I just keep telling myself, this is temporary, Tracy.
Come on.
This is temporary. Just wait and see what opens up once you get through this. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of like an excitement.
Yeah, that's which so is kind good. Of crazy. That's so crazy. It's all that. I love that. I like to correlate fear with excitement now, because I know that fear isn't a bad thing. I just made a video on that. Fear is not a negative thing. A lot of times it's just an emotion. It's a guide. When we're actually supposed to lean into that direction. You know what I mean?
Hands down. I always think of fear as this doorway you've never been through yet, right? And so it's it's asking you to go through it, yet we have so much fear because it's the unknown. Mm-hmm. We talked about that. It's we don't know what's on the other side of it, yet there's endless possibility on the side of it. we create a narrative and we scare ourselves into never even opening that door. And so I agree. I now look at fear as like, okay, like bring this on.
Yes.
There's like a level of excitement.
And it's funny because it's like, I like the door analogy, because what fear will make us do, or what our minds will do to us with fear, is the door will be shut and we'll hear this loud roar on the other side of it, and we think it's just this huge monster. And when you actually open the door, it's this little small little
dog,
thing. Yeah,
right?
little dog with an amplifier in his voice. It was never that bad, you know what I mean?
Yes, I do.
It's so funny. What were those early like adult years like for you? Like those, 18 to 25, college, figuring out what you want to do in your life. Like, what was that like? What was that season of your life like for you?
It was probably one of the hardest seasons of my life. So I went to RIT and was scouted to play volleyball, and just very excited time. And at that point, the eating disorder was very active, but I was maintaining it. And you do go through these levels of like still being able to keep up with work, and like you're still functioning. And I got to my freshman year preseason in the fall, and I couldn't, like my body just wasn't doing what it needed to do.
Wow.
I didn't recognize myself on the court. It was embarrassing. Like I had no energy. I didn't want to be with the team ever. Like I started isolating more, and with that, the eating disorder symptoms really increased more. And so my coach actually sat me down and had an intervention, and they said, we need you to leave RIT and go get help, and like we will welcome you back, but you like our RIT so basically can't support you through this. And so that was the first time I had ever gone to treatment. And so college, I just couldn't wait to get through college. And I think it was because I was so lost. I was so lost in why I was still struggling with the eating disorder. I was so lost with who I was and what direction I was going. And it was like, maybe if I just choose something and get through it. And that was kind of push through was like my mentality for everything. Like, I'm just going to push through this. I'm going to like guard up, armor up, and I'm going to push through and get it over with. And that was kind of my college experience, sadly. Like if there was one, I hate to ever think like wish to go back, but I didn't get out of college what I think it's meant to do. It was the lack of control in college added a lot of anxiety to the eating disorder, and it just like amplified it that much more, which I think we do see with eating disorders on college campuses. We do see them really spike in freshman years because of that. You have nobody around to watch you, So those were rough years for me.
And I do want to touch on, I didn't know that you were an athlete.
Yeah,
I did not know that. It makes so much sense.
I was.
Height, I think that's something that, that's not talked about enough is, what it's like being a college athlete dealing with, mental, emotional, whatever it is that you're dealing with behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And trying to navigate that, because so many things get in the way. I don't want to let down my coaches. I don't want to let down my teammates. I don't want to be seen as this or that. I don't want the stigma on me. It's like, but it's also affecting the way you're showing up on the court or trying to play your sport, or even the relationship you have to your sport. So it's this constant, like, inner battle of trying to figure out what to do with this hovering cloud of just whatever it is you're dealing with just consuming you.
Yeah. And how do you turn that off?
Right.
Like we've talked about, there's this flow state you get into, right? Yeah. When you're speaking, when you're playing a sport. And we saw it at the Olympics this year. This was the first year that really brought light to mental health, which is incredible. But those athletes have to get into the state of flow. And to do that, you have to turn the mind off, right? And you just have to like let it move through you. And when you are dealing with significant mental challenges or things in life, it is impossible to do that. Wow. And I've always believed, I was a teacher first, like we don't educate children on how to do any of that.
No, we don't.
We don't give them tools. We don't give them language. We don't give them a scale. We give them nothing to explain what's going on up there. So they make their own coping strategies. Eating disorders, exactly. Like that is the youngest thing a child has control over is food.
Right.
They don't have alcohol and drugs and video games and technology. Well, we know
most of. I know what you mean.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So it's the easiest thing to sort of be able to control.
Right.
But yeah, athletes, it's all next level because they're expected to be up here. That bar is set, and it's like if you don't hit it, then what? So yeah, I don't think we talk about it enough when it comes to the athletic world.
Yeah, that's a whole segment we need to talk about, is just how to navigate, if you're an athlete, student athlete, whatever it is, how to navigate, the mental and emotional aspect of what you have to deal with as a human being first.
Absolutely.
You know what I mean?
Because I feel that's the first that you actually gets pushed aside, like your humanness actually, because you're expected. This is just the expectation.
That's a fact. That's so true. You mentioned teaching.
Yeah.
So this was post-college.
So I went back. So I went to RIT for nutrition, which was not the best choice. Okay. It was because clearly I was in my struggles. And then, so in 2010, I was living in Seoul, Korea. And
what?
I lived in Korea for 3 years, and I ended up getting hit by a car. So I was walking across the street and was struck by a car, and I was casted up and was able to return home and was basically in a wheelchair. Mm-hmm. And at that same time, my niece was born. And so Hazel was born with a genetic deletion that was undocumented. And so she had special needs. And I was witnessing these therapists and teachers come into the house and work with her. So I was living with my sister at this time. And I'm watching these teachers, and I'm like, this is so cool. Like, this is what I want to do. And so I went back to school to be a special ed teacher for early childhood.
Wow.
So the little guys, which was really fun to me because they just, when it comes to special needs, which I don't even think is special needs, I think they just all have their own language and they all have their own ability, and it's up to us to figure it out and then teach them at that level. And that was always so fun to me, to be like, all right, I'm going to learn everything about this child and then create a curriculum, create something to then bring it to them so they can learn. And so I loved it. So I did that for about 10 years before I jumped to Safe Space.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. I did not know you got into teaching.
Yeah,
what was it like? I want to know. So after you left, you removed yourself from the volleyball team, that whole thing happened. You finished out your undergrad at RT?
I finished up my undergrad. Yep.
What was that process like for you in those, specifically your senior year, trying to figure out post-college? What am I going to do? What do I want to do?
It's so hard.
Yeah.
It's so, because I don't even think we know who we really are at that point.
Right.
So then they're saying, okay, now you need to choose, and you're going to choose what you want to do for the rest of your life, and you're going to throw thousands of dollars at it. And it's so much pressure. And so I did not make the right choice. I went to a private school, right, I'm not using that degree at all.
Yeah,
let's be honest. But after I graduated, I was like, I know I don't want to do nutrition. So what do I want to do? And so I did a plethora of random jobs. Mm-hmm. I did sales. I was a manager at Panera. I worked for the muscular dystrophy and did events and fundraising. Dang. And I just threw myself into things that sounded interesting. And I think that allowed me to pick and choose from those things what I enjoyed doing. But most people don't come out and know, oh, I want to be an engineer or I want to be a lawyer. I feel like it takes us some time to figure that out. I still feel like I'm figuring out what the heck I'm doing with my life.
Absolutely.
To be completely honest.
It's a constant process.
Yeah.
It's a constant journey.
Yeah.
Yeah. Go ahead.
What about you though? Did you know, you had an inkling, but was it clear?
I'd say yeah. It wasn't the thing wasn't clear. The path was.
The path was.
Right? Like I knew, okay, I'm moving in this direction.
Yeah.
Now, wherever this direction takes me, whatever comes my way in that, I'm with it, but I know I'm moving in this direction.
I love that.
It happened after my whole experience with being diagnosed with bipolar, being in the hospital, going through, you know, my spiritual journey, my inner journey, all that stuff. Like, I just made a commitment to figure out who I was.
Yeah.
And I was like, listen, at that time I had basically 2 full years of college left of eligibility on the court. So I was like, I could use this time where I have no bills, no responsibilities, none of that to really figure out who I am, so that I'm not feeling this sense of lostness and confusion the rest of my life. And then I get involved into a job or a career or a path from that place.
Yeah.
Feeling like that's going to give me some sense of like self, but it didn't. So for me, I found a path that I wanted to go down, a certain direction, and I just let my heart and my intentions lead me down that way. And it kind of brought me to this. Like I couldn't really envision, okay, I'd be sitting in safe space with Tracy. You know what I mean?
Oh, of course.
Like you can't, but it's like, I knew like this feels right. Like I know this is part of the path. Like I'm moving in the right direction. Keep doing this stuff.
I think that's the only thing we can be certain of is the next step, right? I was thinking about that today because I can't see what's next. And I'm like, all I know is what next step feels good. And I think that's the only thing we can do. We can take that next step and see where that next step leads us, right? But that also forces us to be really mindful and in the moment, as well as unattach to everything that wants us to attach to it. So it's a constant challenge in many ways.
Yeah, you're speaking. You're hitting a lot. Because that's where a lot of anxiety comes from. Is focusing so much on the future and on next week or this thing instead of just focusing on the step right in front of you.
Yes.
Like just if you really just say that out loud, like, hey, don't focus on anything other than the one step that you have right in front of you. That right there releases pressure. It releases anxiety. Hold up, I don't have to have everything figured out. Just take this next step.
Absolutely.
That's it. When after you take that next step, take another next step.
Yeah.
If you want to pause for a little bit, pause. Ground yourself. Take another step. That's so much better than, I gotta get there. I'm so worried about that. Is it going to work out?
Here's my 10-year plan. Here's my 20. Yes. And it's so hard because we also can't compare our journey to anybody else's.
Come on.
So it's not like your roadmap is mine. And so we look to other people to show us the way. And we really should be looking inward. We really because that's not our journey.
Come on.
And so that is also, I think I focused so long on what other people were doing around me and comparing myself, and I got lost in that world instead of learning how to listen to myself and make decisions based on what I wanted. That took me decades. Decades. Yeah.
What's that process like? Learning how to listen to yourself, for you at least, and how did that kind of evolve to where it is now?
Yeah. So I get really, once a day I get really quiet because there's so much external noise at this point. Until that process of getting better, of being really mindful in moments. I when I'm aware of it, I can be, but I'm human. I get lost in the daily, text messages and phone calls, and it's constant. So I take 30 minutes a day every morning, and I meditate, and I get really quiet, and then I journal right after. Some days I ask questions. Some days I just say, bring me what I need to know today. I'm listening, what. And so it's one of my favorite times because it's the only time I feel like I can really hear my intuition the clearest. I can hear, but I feel like I'm still building my intuition up, that voice, because in a way, trauma shuts that voice off. And as you heal from trauma, you learn to trust yourself again. And your intuition is your trust, it's your light, it's your guide. And so it's actually like a muscle we have to relearn how to listen to and find. And I found that meditation, or I think people get scared of the word meditation, but it's really just sitting there quietly and like letting your thoughts go and just like seeing what comes up. Like that has been what has connected me the most to that voice.
Beautifully said. I love it. Yes, people do get scared of meditation.
They do. They're like, I can't do this.
I gotta sit like this.
Yeah, I gotta play some Om music. No, you don't have to do any of those things. You don't.
Oh, that's hilarious. So, okay, let's talk about the transition from teaching to safe space.
Okay.
It was teaching right to safe space.
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that process like? And when did that idea start to cultivate in your mind and you start to give it more attention and energy and actually be like, I want to do this?
Yeah. So I've always had a brain where I would see people doing something and I'd say, there's a better way to do that. Like or a more creative way. Like I always deconstruct processes and reconstruct them. And I never knew what that was really called. Yeah, I'm a manifesting generator is what they call. Okay. So I come up with these ideas, right?
I like that.
Of better ways, solutions in my head, at least they are. And so I had just gotten back from treatment the last time, and I had spent 9 months away from my family and my kids because I was determined to get better. And at that point in time, the medical model, the model of recovery for eating disorders, that's all we had. And so I was like, I'm going to go and I'm going to spend all my finances and all this time and do what everyone is saying works. I'm going to do it. And so I spent 9 months in St. Louis and came back to Syracuse. And I was at this level of recovery that I'd never been at. Wow. Since the age of 10. I felt amazing in my body. My mind was clear. I was creating. I felt so good. And I got back to Syracuse once again, and it was like instant, like my eating disorder wanted to come back. And so this one night I was sitting at the dining room table and I was like, I have to create something. And it was like a download, and it came really fast. And like I got out crayons and this piece of paper and I just started drawing it. And I literally created like a business plan that night, and it was called Safe Space. And because in treatment, they repeatedly asked you in art therapy to create your safe space. What does that look like? What does that feel like in your bones? What is safety? And that was the hardest question for me to ask or answer because I didn't know what safety felt like. My nervous system did not know what safety felt like. I had been living in fight or flight my whole life. And so what was that? So I started to create that, and this idea of safe space came to mind. And so at that point, it was pre-COVID. Mental health was really still not really a thing we were talking about. And I remember showing people and them being like, okay, like... cool.
Yeah.
And so I was like, all right, I'm just going to start. So I just started running these peer-to-peer support groups, which in eating disorders and trauma, because I'm like, these are the two things I know, right?
Yes.
So I started running support groups, and then COVID hit, and all of a sudden there was like this aha moment of like, this isn't just me. Like people are struggling, and we have gotten so good and practiced and like that we cover so much up, we hide so much up as humans, and it's happening to everybody. Like this is not just me. And it was just so clear at that time. And so that's when I really started to go at it. And I was still teaching full-time and creating Safe Space, and started the nonprofit, and I actually started an LLC portion of the business too, and was like going full force. And then it was about a year and a half ago where I was like, okay, I'm ready to jump.
Wow.
Like my passion for teaching just wasn't there anymore. I was so burnt out. Educators are so burnt out.
Shout out to my mom. She a teacher. She be telling me, keep going. Yeah.
They are first responders. We didn't get a break during COVID. We didn't stop.
Yeah.
And the needs of our children are extreme, and nobody really knows what it's like in schools right now. but you are constantly putting out fires. You're constantly dealing with mental health concerns over and over. And there's less teaching and more of that going on. And I burnt out. I did. And so I was at this point where I'm like, if I'm going to jump, now's the time. And so, yeah, I jumped, which was terrifying.
But look what it led to.
I'm
so happy you did that. That right there should give so many people hope, because one of my biggest things is just doing what your heart is pulling you to do.
Yes.
When you were sitting there and you had this download and you put it to paper and you actually started to cultivate it, then you took the leap. Like, we all have the opportunity to do that, right? Yeah. We all have things that we gravitate towards or we resonate with, or we have a vision or something that just pops in our head, like, I want to try that. Just try it.
Yeah.
Do it.
Yes.
And I always tell people that the win, like, you don't, like, the best part of it is when you actually take the leap. Like, that's when you get the most out of it. Whether it works out in the end, whether you get a desired outcome in the end, that's besides the point. Sometimes things are going to go your way, sometimes they're not.
Yep.
But the fact that you were even willing to actually embrace the fear, to act in courage, to take a leap of faith, you won right there. Keep living your life like that.
Completely agree. I always like to say, even if it's quote unquote, even if the outcome is not what we expect, because it's never failure. It's never failure. We're the one that sets those expectations, right? If we didn't have expectations, we wouldn't be failing.
Come on.
So, like, it's never failure to me. But when we don't meet those expectations or whatever happens, to me, I'm always like, but there was somebody I met along the way. There was somewhere where something I learned, something that situation taught me that I'm now taking
that's good.
into this next realm. There's no coincidences. We are put through the trials of life for a reason. And we can either take that skill or that lesson, whatever we're taught, or we can become a victim to it. We have a choice with every decision that's thrown at us. And it is your outlook. It is literally your outlook that guides you through that. And I think we see that so much in the mental health world, where people just are like, they give up, right? And I think that is one of the clear things to me now, is just like, if I can do it, anyone can do it, right? Anyone can do it. And so, yeah, just powerful.
Have you heard of, I just recently saw this probably like a month ago, the idea of, I don't know if it's overcompensating, but over analyzing your problems?
Oh, absolutely.
Have you heard of that? Like, there was this lady who was on Joe Rogan's podcast, and she said the book was about literally how we talk too much about our problems, and that creates more problems.
There's no action.
Yeah.
It's like we sit and we perseverate on them.
That's what it was.
And we talk through them, and we talk through them. But the action is what actually changes things.
Yeah, it's not just about talking.
No,
right.
No, which is why talk therapy is incredible. But if there's no action behind that, you stay stuck. Which is why, like, that is why, just like what you were saying, just moving forward, just jumping, even if it's in the wrong direction, it's in a direction. And you will get redirected, right?
Come on.
So it's just like, we talk through things until we're blue in the face to just and I think it helps soothe the anxiety, it soothes the fear, but it doesn't get us anywhere.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, that is so true. And I think it's a balance of, I'm not saying don't talk.
Oh,
right? We talk about that.
Course.
Like,
be
we
open.
Love to talk. Yes. Be open, be vulnerable, speak about what you're dealing with, but don't allow it to become like quicksand, keeping you just slowly getting stuck the more you talk about it. Yes. Get up and do something. They were like, even running errands can help with your mental health.
Yeah.
Going for a light walk around your neighborhood. Getting up and going washing dishes can help with your mental health. Just getting up and doing something other than sitting there and perseverating. Is that how it's perseverating?
Yes, perseverating.
On whatever it is.
I used to set a rule because isolation would be my thing. So I would set a 24-hour rule. I was allowed to isolate for 24 hours, and then I had to get out. Like, I was allowed to recharge. I was allowed to whatever I was making sense of it in my head at the time. And then I needed to get out. It could be go walk around Wegmans. It could be go walk around the park. Like, it is amazing what nature will do to mental health. But we get so stuck in what feels comfortable, which COVID created a false sense of safety in isolation. And we became very comfortable in isolation. We became very comfortable in our sweatpants and on our couch. And we are seeing that it's very hard to get people to break out of that comfort, but it's hurting them in the long run.
1000% it is. And I think COVID forced us all into isolation, but it's more of like, I'm just alone. There's a big difference between like intentional solitude and just being lonely, you know. And I think most people are like, oh no, I've been alone for a while now. It's like, but there's no intention behind that time of solitude in that time of being alone. And I think it's just a big difference. So something that you have to distinguish between.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I remember when it was probably a year ago when I was like, loneliness to me is like an ache. It's like this feeling in my chest. It's like a longing, like I don't want to be alone and I'm alone and it hurts. That's what loneliness feels to me. I love my solitude time. I love being alone. It is two different feelings. And so knowing what those feelings are and how to take care of yourself when you're in both places of either being alone and feeling loneliness is really like an independent knowledge. Like you kind of got to figure out, I know when I'm feeling that like loneliness that there are certain things that I do to make myself feel better. So
that's beautiful. Yeah. You've done a TED Talk.
I have.
Yeah, you've done a TED Talk. I saw it and I thought it was great. I want you to touch on that and kind of like the message you were trying to portray and what even led you to wanting to do that.
It's so funny. Yeah. Talk about universe stuff, right? Yeah. It was not on my bucket list.
Crazy.
And this is a Whitney Houston moment.
Okay.
Like these are the things that forced me back into using my voice.
Come on.
And so it was in Arizona. They reached out. I'd never heard of the college, and they were like, "We saw what you're doing. Will you apply for a TEDx talk?" And I was like, is this a joke? Like, really?
Right.
Like, yeah, and she's like, no, I swear, this is not a joke. So they initially had me in this like self-transformational topic. And I was like, I can talk about my story all day long. Perfect. So I created this whole talk and got into the final rounds. And then they're like, so we're going to move you into like the business category. And I was like, okay. And they were like, we want you to talk about mental health in the workplace. And I was like, this is out of my comfort zone. Like, clearly, there's mental health concerns in the workplace. Like, clearly, I'd created safe space and it aligns with it. But this was not easy for me. So I had to create a talk, and you have to memorize it for 14 minutes. And so I fought her. I was like, are you sure? Are you sure you want me in this category? And she's like, yeah, I do. Come on. And so she literally like forced me into this area of such discomfort. It was out of my comfort zone. And so memorized the talk, got really comfortable with it, and I decided I was going to do it on my own. So I flew out to Arizona, Phoenix, and it was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life. Because I got up on stage the day before the event and I completely froze. I couldn't remember my lines. My heart was beating outside of my chest. It's like I wasn't used to the lights and the mic, and I could make all of these excuses. But I was like, I'm going to get up there tomorrow in front of thousands of people and not be able to do this. And it was the feeling of, it was the reminder of an athlete feeling. Like I'm expected to perform at this level, and I'm doubting myself that I can perform at this level right now. Man. And this anxiety rushed in, and I couldn't sleep that night. I was like, and in the middle of the night, I had this voice, which is going to sound, and she said, I'm scared. And I know this was like the little part of Tracy. We call it an inner child. We call it a lot of things. And I said, what are you scared of? And she said, I'm scared of being too big. And so I said, okay. So I said, you don't have to do this though. Like, this is for me to do. And I said, so what I need you to do is I need you to go up on that stage and be Whitney. Like, I want you to perform just like Whitney would perform. And I'm going to be right there doing all the hard stuff. And so the other thing that came to me that night was that I needed to create a safe space on that stage. I didn't feel safe. And so that morning I got up early and I went down and I took my shoes off and I sat on that stage and I meditated for about an hour. And I literally in my mind created a safe space. And I went through some of my talk and all of that. And then I changed some of the rules. I sat outside until it was my time to get on stage. I debated wearing shoes. Like, I went through all these things of what's going to make me feel the safest up there. And then as I'm walking up the stage, I literally have a conversation with this little girl. And I say, so you're going to sit right there. And I'm going to go do my thing. And when I get back, like, we're going to celebrate together. And so I got up there. And I mean, it wasn't perfect, but I nailed it. Like, it was.
Yeah, you nailed it.
I got off and I was so proud of myself. And I think we have a hard time saying that sometimes about our because it wasn't perfect. But like, what I went through those 24 hours was like massive for me. And it was me. It was all me. And I just was so proud of myself. And so, yeah, so it was about mental health in the workplace, and it's actually the next business that I'm creating. So
really,
yeah, it's called Safe Space Office, which
that's
is coming out next month. So it's
beautiful.
Safe Spaces for businesses. Yeah,
but that is, I mean, we didn't even talk about the talk. Now I love that you went in that direction, because the idea of that inner child and the importance of understanding everybody has one.
Yes.
And you have to work on that relationship with it. You know what I mean? That is beautiful, the way you just broke that down. You could touch on that more if you want.
Yeah, I think it's so powerful because I don't think we realize how often that part of us is in control. And so learning to witness when your inner child is loud and triggered and in control. We see it a lot with people's reactions when they get really angry or can't control their emotions. Usually that's an inner child part of them. For me, it was, it's a codependent part. It's a caretaker part. It's a part I learned how to do very young. And so I now clearly know when she's triggered, and I have to have a conversation with her. Like, I have to soothe her. It's called reparenting in ways. Like, you have to parent that part of yourself. And I remember being introduced to that in treatment. And it was the first time that I was like, wow, this makes sense to me. Like, this makes sense to me.
Yes.
So you've done some inner child work too.
Yeah, my mom brought that up. She heard that was a deep conversation we had, because, you know, my mom's been through a lot when she was young and stuff like that, and she never was exposed or heard of that idea of the inner child. And when she just broke down crying because she was just thinking of that, you know, that little girl who went through those certain experiences, and like how she had the realization that little girl is still inside of her, and it's her job to protect her, you know, and take care of her and show her that this is a safe space.
Absolutely.
That's crazy. Yeah.
And I'm here to protect you now.
Yeah,
right?
I got you.
I'm here to do, and that's where all of our early childhood beliefs come from. Either I'm not enough, or I'm too much, or I'm unlovable, or we create these narratives based off of our inner child, and we literally take them into adulthood with us. And so they say adults are literally like unhealed children running around in adult suits. And it's so true. Once you start to recognize it in other people, you're like, okay, so I see it.
Yep.
I see it.
Yep.
And we all have one.
Yes.
We all have one.
Yes. I found that through my healing journey and healing the things that I need to within myself. It helps me to understand the external world in a whole different light, especially people. You know, because a lot of times they say people are just a reflection of you. And so it's really wild. That's so true, because people will definitely show you certain areas that you haven't fully healed in, or certain areas that you're working on that you can see in them.
Yes.
You know?
That's something I did maybe a year ago, where I started to pay attention to the things that would really annoy me about certain people or trigger me.
Come on, yeah, nah.
And that was a clear representation of something that I was either lacking in myself. Like, I really got annoyed with people that were selfish. And I was like, why does it trigger me so much that people are quote unquote selfish? And it was because I was so the other side of the spectrum. I gave all of myself away. There was no ounce of selfishness in my body, that I was like, I'm jealous of how much time and space you spend on yourself. And it was such a trigger for me, but it was literally mirroring what I couldn't do in myself. And it was this like aha moment, like, okay, I need to learn how to be selfish.
That's good. That's good. Self-love is service, by the way.
Yes.
That's one of my favorite sayings. Shout out to Heinz, man. He put me onto that. Self-love is service to the world. It is. Oh, God, that's good. Okay, so now let's dive a little bit into that speech a little bit, and like the topic of that, like the importance of mental health, or talk a little bit about mental health in workspaces.
In the workplace.
Yeah.
So really what the speech was about is that we've expected employees to come to work and sort of zip themselves up between the hours of 9 to 5. We expect them to really put away everything that's going on in their home lives, in their lives outside of here, and perform and pretend that there's not these outside factors, because we don't create a space of safety and vulnerability in the workplaces. And I see it, especially as a woman, it's a very masculine world in the corporate workspace. So not only can I not go in and be vulnerable, but I have to go in and actually be very masculine too. I have to wear certain clothing. I can't be fully me, because you might think I'm, you're always monitoring yourself as a woman. And so we have not created safe spaces within corporations. And so really, I broke down 2 ways of doing that. And number 1 is vulnerability in leadership. Up to this point, leadership has been mostly from the brain. It's been power, control, very masculine, dominant energy. We are moving away from that. We are moving more into the heart, which is a more feminine leadership. And with that, it's demonstrating vulnerability.
Come on.
Because if you are not, as a leader, demonstrating vulnerability, you cannot expect the people underneath you to do it. You are saying it's okay, and they don't want to look less than. They already are less than you because they're underneath you in rank. So if you're pretending that everything's great and not admitting that life is hitting you in the face, like, they're not going to be able to do it. And so number 1 is a vulnerable leadership. And I'm not saying you need to go and just like trauma dump all of your stuff on the table, right. But you have to open the door to it. And the second thing is providing them with tools. So it could be a space that's actually in the office, but it's allowing mental health days. It's allowing a 15-minute break to go meditate outside. It's nature walks. It's doing humanity work. It's coming together and taking a full day off and working for helping a nonprofit in our city. There's all of these ways that we can encourage mental health supports that isn't through HR or through an EAP program. Like, it's culture, it's community. And it's going to take brave leadership in our town that are the first ones to start to change, and then everyone else will follow suit, because we don't want to be left out, right? So it's going to take a few movers and shakers here in Syracuse that start to do that, and then the rest will follow.
I love that.
Is my belief.
Yeah, that's so good. Before I forget, for all my men out there, when you talk about leaning more into the heart, into your feminine,
yes.
I want people to understand that as human beings, we have both feminine and masculine energy. right? So I don't want men taking that as like, oh, I got to act like a woman. No, that's not what it's saying.
No.
But as a man, you need to learn how to tap into your feminine in a healthy way, because that allows you to be vulnerable. That allows for emotional regularity, emotional intelligence, the ability to meet somebody where they are, right? Because I think a woman's intuition, a woman's ability to handle emotions and to feel, you know what I mean, and to be vulnerable is second to none. So understanding as a man we have a certain aspect of that inside of us.
Oh, hands down.
Is important. So I didn't want them getting confused.
No,
with
and
that,
I'm so glad that you brought that up. I'm so glad you brought that up. And as a woman, if we don't feel safety in our feminine, if a man is unable to show up in his too, like it's this dynamic that happens, which we see in relationships a lot. It forces women to be in their masculine more, which we don't want to be in. We want to be vulnerable, but vulnerability is also a doorway for being hurt in ways. Like
Absolutely.
It can be taken advantage
Absolutely.
of. We are the weaker. Like when it comes to this, we can be overpowered much easier. And so it is this game of energies, but it's getting men to be very secure in both of those. And knowing that it doesn't mean anything, you know, like the feminine is actually a gift in men. But you also were taught as a man the exact opposite. So we're breaking down generations of beliefs,
1,000%.
structures.
Yep, 1,000%. And I think you hit on something beautiful about the vulnerability. But like, in order to really like live a life of authenticity and love, you have to understand like being hurt is a part of that.
Yes.
And I think so many people try to go through life without being hurt. So you create all these walls and blockages, or try to block people off. But in return, you're really only blocking yourself off.
Yeah.
Right? And I think they said, be mindful that the walls you put up to protect you aren't the same walls that imprison you.
Yes.
You know?
Yes. And we remember what that pain feels like, and we don't want to experience it again.
Right. Yes.
So we just wall ourselves off. So from everything, vulnerability, and it really walls you off from true love. It walls you off from experiencing true emotional connection. So you're right. You really aren't protecting yourself. You're taking away the most natural and beautiful gift between humans. And but it's protection for a lot of people.
It 100% is. It
Yeah.
100% is. Man, oh, that's good.
Because as kids, like we don't worry about that. It's not until our first heartbreak, right? That's what
I was going to say. Yes,
like,
come on.
We realize like, oh, this hurts. Like this is this is possible, right? But I actually think it's the bravest thing to keep your heart open in a world that really wants you to close off. I think it's the bravest thing to be able to keep your heart open.
I do too, for sure. And I think, I think it's like anything in life. I mean, the only way to set healthy boundaries or to have standards is to go through certain experiences to realize that you need to have boundaries.
Yeah.
Or to, involve yourself with people where you're like, nah, I need to up my standards, or I need to have certain standards so I don't allow certain things to happen. Like,
right.
So it's like when you close yourself off to people or things or experiences, you're closing yourself off to so much growth, so much evolution, so much love that wants to come in, and to love is to risk being hurt, right?
Hands down. So. That's very beautifully said.
Thank you. Let me see what I had, because I think we're almost there. This is the first of many, by the way. I need people to know that. Yeah, right? I'm going to have Tracy on reoccurringly, because obviously, as you can see, she's amazing. She has an amazing personality, amazing spirit, speaks very clearly, and has so much inside her that you guys need to hear and the world needs to hear.
Thank you.
I mean that. So,
thank you.
I like this. How do you balance? Because obviously, with creating safe space, you have a lot of people in here that are, looking for help, trying to figure out their own situations and things. How do you balance your own healing and your own growth while still taking care of you know, the people that come into what you've created?
That's such a great question. To be completely honest, it's part of my routine now. It's something I look forward to in so many ways. So I still see a therapist every couple weeks.
Oh, wow.
I get massages every couple weeks. I do breath work once a month. Like, there are things that are just my staples. And I know when I start to go down sort of a road of more burnout, or more like when you give energy to others constantly, like, you have to recharge. And that was something I learned very later on in life, that recharge time is so important, if it's in nature or with my kids, or just like, and so I kind of disappear for a few days and then I'll be able to come back. But it's become a dance now between the two, because if I don't have this other part, I can't show up and do what I'm supposed to do. So there's really no eliminating the self-care factor at this point. Like, and I do little bits every day of self-care. I love taking a bath. Like, I just find the magic in little moments that feed me.
Yeah.
Like a good cup of coffee or tea, like just the smallest of things, right? That feed me, bring me joy, that allow me. But I also know that if I'm not in this space, then I don't want people in the energy when I'm depleted, right? Because I'm not at my best self.
Right.
So that's not fair either. So I've just learned, but through a lot of trial and error, like, how to create that balance.
Yeah, absolutely. That's one of the toughest things is flipping it too, because a lot of people think it's outward then inward. It's inward then outward.
Yes.
You have to fill your cup in order to pour into other people's cups.
Hands down.
Most people, it's pour, and then they try to fill. It's like, you've already depleted everything.
You're done.
You're done. Oprah said, "I'm going to fill my cup till it runneth over into other people's cups."
I love that.
Right? It's just it's an organic thing that I'm giving because I fill my cup up so much.
I love that so
it's
much.
Beautiful.
That is really beautiful.
It definitely helped me a lot. I feel like there's so much more we could talk about. I don't want to hold you too long. I know you have other responsibilities. So before we get into the final three questions, which are like a quick round question.
Okay.
A quick round. I want to give you a chance to share a message, anything that's heavy on your heart, that you just want the world to hear from Tracy.
I think I'll go back to what we sort of talked about before. You are not alone. And I think that we have created a world where we feel alone because we do not have enough spaces that allow us to truly organically show up as who we are. And so we fear taking off those masks and all of those guards that we have built up over the years to really authentically show up. But once you do that and start to practice who you are and you connect with other people, it is this insanely magical moment that it feeds your soul to such an extreme that you realize that you are not alone and that your problems are everyone's problems and that we are all trying to figure it out. Yet I believe that as we continue to create these pockets of community that allow us to do that, we really are going to change the world. Like, we're going to see mental health just naturally start to fall away because we are screaming for connection. We are screaming to be seen and heard and loved authentically. And so I do think this is the first step. And so I just want people to really know that they are not alone in any of this.
I love that so much. I love that so much. So simple yet so profound.
Yeah.
Of the final three questions, the first will be,
shoot 'em.
What is the best piece of advice you ever heard, given, or received in your life? Or one of, because a lot of people get stumped on this because like, I can't choose one. Whatever comes to your mind.
Best piece of advice. I think it was probably from my grandfather. So, and this is random because I hadn't really thought about this until just now. Remember the first time? So he was a veteran, and as he got older, was very quiet. Yet I knew he struggled with depression. I was in my own struggles at that time. I could see him in his, and he would always kind of plaster a smile on his face, but I could see it. And he said to me, like towards the end of his life, he was just like, I want you to know that, first of all, you are not alone, like with everything you're going through. Like, I feel like he never spoke about it a lot, but he said, I challenge you to never stop being you and to let the rest go. And I think at that time, it didn't make complete sense to me. Like, okay, I didn't know who I was. But so much of holding on to things, holding on to shame, regret, past experiences, all of that idea of just let it go. And so it's something I try and really live by today is it's in the past, let it go.
What's the worst piece of advice you ever heard?
Oh gosh, the worst piece of advice. Why do I feel like there's more of that than I had a lot of people tell me that I couldn't do this. I couldn't do safe space.
What we're sitting in right now.
Mm-hmm. I either didn't have the credentials, or it wasn't important, or I had a lot of feedback of that it wouldn't work, that it wasn't. Yeah. Yep.
Wow. We got to just take a moment for that one, because we're literally sitting in what was once a vision that people told her wasn't possible.
Yeah.
And we're sitting in it.
Now
and it's beautiful. I wish we could turn the cameras and show you. It's beautiful. It really is. I'm looking at the stuff on the walls too. I didn't even see that.
Yeah, that's all the men's group.
Yeah, that's fire.
They're doing great work.
We'll get into that in a different episode for sure. And the last is, if you could create one law that the whole world had to follow, what would it be and why? Hypothetically speaking, obviously.
The one law.
One rule the whole entire world had to follow.
It's more love. It's so simple. It's like so simple. It's choosing love over fear. We are constantly staying in the state of fear, which is why our world looks like the way it does. And if we literally just showed more love in every action, in every relationship, in every choice, the world would heal itself.
Love is the answer.
Love is the answer.
It really is, though.
End all be all.
Before I just heard that. I was watching a video the other day where, because most people think the opposite of love is hate.
Yeah.
It's fear.
It is.
It's fear.
It is.
And I didn't realize that. You always think it's hate, but it's actually fear. Fear is the direct opposite of love.
Yep.
And so it's learning how to remove yourself from allowing fear to control you and allowing love to control you.
I love that.
So Tracy, thank you so much for this episode.
Thank you
this
so
was amazing.
Much. This was wonderful.
This was awesome.
I appreciate
like
it.
I said, first of many, y'all.
Yes.
I appreciate you guys watching for another week, and most importantly, remember to take everything you heard and seen with a grain of salt. I'll see you guys next week.